For my browser's not showing.
Hello, everybody. This is Jodie Thornton, and today I'm joined by Louise O'Reilly, and we are going to be talking all things diversity and inclusion. So, Louise, thank you so much for joining me today.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me on, and I'm really glad that the very first part of that live was me adjusting myself and making sure my bras weren't showing. So hello everyone, my name is Louise O'Reilly and I have to do that in the very last minute.
It's always the way, right? And I think that this is part of us showing up, is really showing that, you know, we're just being real. There's no need to be pretending that we're not real people who need to adjust ourselves from time to time.
Exactly.
So Louise, can you tell us a little bit about your business and how it serves the world?
Sure. So look, it comes a bit from my background. So I am a Warawa Noongar Aboriginal woman, and growing up I found that I was excluded a lot in basically all the communities that I belong to, and that also include my family community as well. It was very difficult growing up and identifying as an Aboriginal person, looking the way I did, but also living in the time that we're living now, and have been living, where it is very exclusive in terms of who's accepted in our society. And I'm not even talking just about marginalised groups like those smaller groups like Aboriginal communities. I'm talking about even larger groups like women and things like that as well. So where we have a society where the main people who are included in all spaces are a very small percentage of people. You know, they are the middle-aged man who has a lot of money, who most likely is of Christian or Catholic faith, who is a cisgendered person, and they have a high position role in their jobs, and they have, you know, 2.4 kids, and whatever it is. It doesn't make sense that they are the people who have the greatest influence, the greatest power, the greatest inclusion. And then we have pretty much everyone else in the world who isn't valued in that same way. So I struggled with my identity a lot, and I found it very painful, very difficult to do that. But then I kind of thought, you know what, I've grown through this, I've made it through, I can continue on like this, and we can all just be, everything can just be how it is. But then I had children, and I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I'm going to bring a beautiful little human into the world, and they most likely will have to experience that same kind of struggle, that same pain, that same challenges with their identity in the current world that we're living. And I just went, I'm not okay with that. I'm not going to accept that. The status quo is not good enough for me. It's not good enough for my babies. It's not good enough for any of our babies. And so I'm doing everything I can to change it. And what I focus on is inclusion and diversity. And I focus on inclusion first before diversity, because there has to be inclusive spaces created before there can be genuine diversity in those spaces, before we can have people sitting at the table and actually being valued and respected and represented. Those spaces need to be created first. And it's by those people who have that influence, who have some say, who have to recognise within themselves, this isn't quite working and this isn't really okay. So that's kind of where my business is. I do one-on-one coaching, consultations. I create e-courses, and I run programs. So I do lots of different things to help support business people to create that inclusion first, and then supporting them into having that genuine diversity come through their business as well.
I love that. And I think it's one of the things that I've been ruminating a lot on recently, is this idea that that small group of men usually who are the ones that are welcome and centered in all the spaces, there's this idea that they're getting everything that they want and the rest of us are not. And I don't think that that's even happening. Like, I think if we look at some of the people that people say have too much power, I honestly look at their lives and think that they are using that power to fill a hole that it's never going to fill. And whether that's power or money or whatever it is. And it's this idea that until we actually help people to be inclusive, in the process of learning to be inclusive, is the process of recognizing, actually, there's something going on in me that I am trying to push down in order, in the process of, centering myself. And I think that's a fascinating concept because it brings so much tenderness to the conversation around diversity and inclusion. It's this idea that we need less force and more connection. And I love hearing you speak on that.
Yeah, and well, I mean, what we're really talking about in this conversation is actually privilege. And the funny thing about privilege is even the most privileged people in the world don't necessarily get what they want. It just means that to get what they want or to reach some kind of level of achievement or status or money goal or whatever it is, it just means it's easier because of the way they have been born. People who are less privileged have to go through more obstacles to get to that same state. And a lot of the time, it's to do with mindset as well. So for me, in terms of the racism that goes on in Australia, it is constant. It is a constant thing that people who don't identify in the majority of what the culture is, or the race that the majority of the people of Australia are, it is really something, it's almost hard to believe how continuous it is and where it is. It's not just if someone is saying something racist in some way, it is the casual conversations you have with seemingly really lovely people. It is the way that we are raising our children. It is our schooling system and how inclusive or non-inclusive it is in the schooling system. It's all systems in general, because those systems to support our community were built to support that small group of people who are the most privileged. And so it creates this barrier of accessibility to reaching certain statuses, to getting jobs, to all kinds of things. And it's just so much harder. It has nothing to do with a person's merit. It has nothing to do with a person's character, with a person's behavior, life choices, nothing like that. It is literally how you were born determines whether life can be easier for you or harder for you. And I'm not okay with that. And most of our children, in all honesty, don't fit that. Our children aren't those most privileged people. And I'm pretty sure people who follow you are not okay with that either.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny how we're conditioned not to see what's going on around us. Like, I remember when I was about 18 years old and my mum was talking about sexism. I think it was specific to the workplace, but just in general. And I remember, like, I argued with her. That may have been the case when you were young, but it's not the case anymore. Now, there would have been so much sexism going on through the schooling that I had already done. There was so much sexism in the media, but I didn't see it. And I think that's part of, the places that we share in terms of the work that we do, is that idea of let's notice the things that are so conditioned in us that we're actually not even seeing a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be really difficult because these are our unconscious biases. These are our unconscious conditioning. So we're not even aware that we have these stories, these things that don't even align with us and aren't for the benefit of ourselves or for our children. And we have these concepts and paradigms built in our heads that this time is great now. And it is, and we compare it to yesteryear, before it was terrible. But if you have someone there to say and point out all these little things going, oh, well, what about when this child did this to another child? Is that okay? Or what about when this teacher is doing this to a child? Is this okay? What about the books that they are reading? What about the education resources that they are being exposed to? Have they been updated? Are they even okay for us in today's society? And a lot of the time it is no. It is no, because the teacher's role is not necessarily to create the stuff that aligns with our culture in the way we are wanting to go. They're so stressed and got so much stuff going on that they're just trying to find the resources that are already created. And a lot of the time they're not even aware of their own biases. They're not aware of the stories that are going in their heads. So you've got classrooms full of children who aren't the most privileged in society, who in a classroom you kind of have to all learn in the same way. And if you don't learn in that same way, you are seen as the failure in our education system. And this kind of stuff all supports inclusion, because in the schoolyard, I look at things and I work with some schools to say, well, how inclusive is this space? Does a child come in here and go, oh, this represents part of my culture? Do you speak my language? Do you celebrate the things that I celebrate on the days I celebrate? In the classrooms, is there segregation happening in the classrooms? Are you separating children into boys and girls categories? What about those non-binary or trans children? What about people who don't learn, have that same, neurodivergency, don't have the same way of thinking that other children have? And I know I can speak from experience. Look, I'll be totally honest, I'm a very intelligent, smart, resourceful person. I struggled in our school systems. I always got good grades, but I know I had to work harder than so many of the people who got those highest grades, because I didn't learn the way the school system wanted me to learn. And I struggled with that. It was so difficult. Like, I would fall asleep in my books. I would study so long and so hard just to get the scores that I got. And it's not okay to do that. It's not okay to say because you don't think in the same way, you're not okay or you're not smart. Just because you look different doesn't mean that you shouldn't be included in this space. Just because you have different cultural customs and the way you talk doesn't mean you don't belong and shouldn't be part of this community. It's so huge and so big, but the lack of inclusion is so prominent in almost all spaces we have in our society. And this is why it's so hard to break out of that.
And I think that example with your study is such a good one, because to me, it's not just about whether you're able then to get the grades that you wanted or not. Like, some people would not be able to overcome that issue when the learning is not tailored to what their learning needs are. But for someone like you who has overcome that, how much did it cost you in hours that those hours could have been thinking about your own identity? Those hours could have been spending social time with family or friends. Those hours, even from your creativity, like, those hours are stolen from you. And I think that's just such a good example about how it's not just about whether we can actually get people, kind of over the difficulties, but it's at what cost does it come? And I think that's, it's just such a huge conversation. So, Louise, can you tell us, for those of us who are running businesses, where do you suggest we start, or what are some of the things that you think we should start with in terms of our awareness of what we might not even realise we could be doing within our businesses?
The very first thing I always tell businesses to start doing is to look within, look at themselves, and really start to look at your own culture, your own lineage and your heritage lines. And also, so with culture, something I find very interesting is a lot of people go, well, I don't have culture. I don't know what that is. And in all honesty, every single person has a culture. If you speak a language, you have a culture. If you wear clothes that you want to wear, you have a culture. If you eat certain foods, you have a culture, and use certain spices, and you entertain in a certain way. It's really good to get very clear on what your culture is, because, and then starting to really appreciate that and be inclusive of all the parts of you, all the seemingly good parts of you, all the seemingly not so good parts of you, the parts of your heritage, and where you came from, part of your story. That really helps, because when you start doing that, you can really start to appreciate people who are in marginalized groups, particularly around racism and things like that, where the culture is very different. You can start to really value the cultural differences. And by no means is differences mean wrong or bad, or one's better than the other, or anything like that. Acknowledging the differences and celebrating them is beautiful, because all cultures are beautiful, and we all essentially want the same thing. We want to have a happy, fulfilling life. We want our children to be happy and to be thriving. We want to feel joy, and we want to feel freedom, and all those beautiful things. As humans, we want the same things. The way we express them through our cultures is that difference. But ultimately, we want that same thing. We want those good feelings. And we're living in societies now where the capacity for us to do that is capped by stuff external to us. There are powers at play that go, you don't have the power to do this particular thing, or you're oppressed in some way. You know, you can't speak at this particular thing. No, your voice on this topic is not valid or valued. So if we start to look at those things from the basis, and then look at what we can do as individuals. So what's important to us? Look at the things we'll never stop talking about. So for me, I'll never stop talking about inclusion. I will never stop talking about racism, human rights. I will never stop talking about feminism. And so that's what I bring into my business. And so it's so much more than about me teaching people how to be inclusive. It's about this is what's inclusive. But these particular topics in this are really important to me, because that has formed my path of how I've got here. And that's how businesses can transform their businesses from what I call a two-dimensional business into a three-dimensional business. So that two-dimensional business is one where this is who I am and these are the things I sell. Two, this is who I am, these are the things I sell, and this is what I stand for. And we are now moving into a world where we're having more conscious buyers, where our clients and our customers are more conscious about and mindful about where they're spending their money. It's got to be more than the service, than the product. It's got to be about the vision and what you're wanting to create, what you're supporting and wanting to change in the world too. And that brings community, and that brings loyalty, and that brings so many things. And so having inclusion and understanding how to be inclusive is really key to business, especially to a thriving business. And I'm not talking about being inclusive, which means you have to be inclusive to everyone. No, not at all. I'm a believer in niching. So you have your niche. But what I have found with my clients is that they actually exclude a fair chunk of their own niche because of their internal biases and social conditioning that teaches them to exclude those particular groups of people. So if we can be inclusive of all of our niche, my goodness, how amazing is that for your business, for your community, for the changes and influence you're going to make in the world. And I mean, if you're a business owner, you want to change something. You're not happy with something that's going on in the world. So you decided to do a business to change it, right?
Yeah. And I think it's that it's that idea of looking at what we can do. So I hear you speak a lot about looking at what is within our own power to do. And that's something that was really stretched my imagination, because I started, with the idea that, I'll just make sure that I'm not excluding anybody. And then when I started to think about like what I would do from an inclusion and diversity perspective, it was always the things I would do when I had, so much more revenue than I have right now. And when I started to really press myself, I started to look at, well, what are some other things? So for example, I'm not yet at the point to hire anybody, but I realized that if I was to put a job ad up, whether that's subcontracting or an actual staff member, I couldn't hand on heart say that I was a safe employer. And so for me, I feel like that to me is, rather than, hire a bunch of people that probably look and sound exactly like me, build up a business, and then let's change the team so that it's inclusive of everybody, like that's actually not okay. And part of the reason it's not okay is that it's excluding from the get-go, but part of the reason it's not okay is that, like, I'm a very small business at this point, so the process of me growing with likely other people who are also growing, that's actually excluding marginalized people from wanting to participate in that growth and benefiting from that growth as well. And so it's, for me, it started with that. And then I started looking at things like, where am I purchasing my stationery? It's gone through, and I've actually gone through everything that I spend money on, everything that I use, everything. And I'm like, in no way have I done everything that's in my power, but it really shifted my focus away from, what I would do if I had a platform, or what I would do once I had $1 million business, what I would do, what I would tell someone else to do, what I would expect other people to do, realizing the sheer volume of things that are within my capacity that require no change in my circumstances before I could be ready to do that. And I think that's, it's something that's sometimes hard to swallow, how much you could be doing when you spend a lot of time thinking about other people, and it's sometimes really difficult to make the commitment to make those consistent small steps. But I really appreciate listening to you speak about that as well. I love all your webinars and all your information, so I highly recommend everybody goes and checks out what Louise is doing. So one of the things I ask everybody I interview is, how do you manage being a business owner and having a family? And the reason I do that is because I think it was last year or the year before, somebody was asking this question of Annabelle Crabb, and she said that she's refusing to answer that question until it's asked of men. And I totally understand the intent of wanting this to be an equal conversation, but I actually think that we're better off having more conversations about what it takes to follow your passions and give your contribution to the world whilst running a family, rather than having less conversations on that path. So I'd really like to know, like, what do you do? How do you balance having a family and having a business?
Well, I think it's less of how do I balance having a family and a business, and more about how do we balance having a family and a business, because and I'm in a situation where I'm married, and my husband and my 2 children are here with me. So I absolutely love the family situation that I am. I adore it. And we together work out how he has his job, we manage the family and how the family works, and I also have my business. Mm-hmm. And we work very well together in when he's at work, I care for the children if they're not at school, and then when he is at home in his off shift, I'm doing my business stuff while he is caring for the children. We have a very equal input into minding the kids, growing our children, supporting them, housework. Everything is very equal in our family, so that works out really, really well. And I really take advantage of working during school hours. Mm-hmm. I put limits on. I don't work outside of school hours. It has to be like a very extreme circumstance, like if people are literally on the other side of the world and they can't attend, then I'll consider working outside of school hours. But I have full support of my husband. He's like my biggest cheerleader. And I think that is a really privileged space to be in, because not all entrepreneurs are in that situation where their partner is in that same boat. I think because we have been in business, my husband and I were in a business together and we closed that business. So there is that understanding of business, the pressures of it and what's required of it and things like that. So that helps that he has that understanding of it. But I think communication is really key. To communicate with each other and go, you know, I've got this thing going on. Is it okay if you take the kids out while I'm doing a Facebook Live so that they're not screaming or making too much noise, because I work from home. So it's just having that beautiful communication. But also I'm very gentle with myself. So if my kids are home and they need their mum, they need mummy cuddles, or they need to just have a chat or a talk, or requesting my specific time, I'm fine to go, okay, business can wait a bit. That's okay. I'm going to go and tend to my children and then I'll come back to it, and not feeling that guilt about it. Just going, there are times that are needed for my babies and there are times that are good for my business. And I think with being a parent, you really have that intuition about when your child needs you and when it's okay to say, no, this is now mummy's time to do business. You can go and play for a bit and I'll be there when I finish. So I think it's really good to understand that. Just be really, like, I can't even emphasize gentleness on yourself around it, because it can be really tricky being a parent and running a business. It really, really can. So focus on the stuff that really gets you traction in your business. Don't worry about doing all the hundreds of social media posts, or do the thing that gets you the most traction. The most important 3 things of the day, do them. And then if anything else gets done, that is a bonus.
Love it. I absolutely love everything you just said. So the last question I have for you is, tell us a little bit about how people can work with you if they are interested in the inclusion and diversity space. What do you offer and where can they find more information?
We can definitely find more information on my website. That's www.louiseoreilly.com.au.
I'll pop that in the comments for everybody.
So original. But look, I do, and it depends on where you are in your business as well. I have free online courses, complete courses that people can come in and do, and they're self-led courses. They can do them. I have, I'm always trying to put out content on social media. As Facebook and Instagram are my 2 that I use. Certainly on my emails, I will send information out to subscribers and things like that. And I do one-on-one coaching, and I do group programs as well. I love doing group programs because the support and community you build with it is so powerful and so amazing. When a lot of people are moving into wanting to learn a bit more about diversity and inclusion, it can be really intimidating. It's like, well, you know, I want to be more inclusive, but what do I say? What do I do? And, you know, where can you have most influence? If you're not doing that groundwork to understand, you know, like who you are, where you came from, what your privilege is, what your culture is, you don't understand what you can do in a way that is most impactful, that creates real change, that actually moves the needle. We're just kind of spreading our energy everywhere and not making any difference. But when we step into those spaces where we have those groups and you create that beautiful tight-knit community, you then have support as well to go, you know what, if you post that thing, I'm going to come on there and I'm going to give it some love and I'm going to support you. And, you know, if someone doesn't like it and you're not feeling great, come back here, and, you know, we'll surround you with a bit of love and support and witness whatever you're going through. Because it can be hard to speak about things that aren't seen in the same way through society's eyes. It can be difficult to go, I'm going to say something that some people won't understand. A lot of people won't understand, but it's important to have these conversations, not only because you feel drawn to doing it, you feel that calling within yourself that I want to be inclusive. I don't want to be part of this society that is oppressing others. It's also about being the role model for your children. And it's also about creating a world for them where they are included. So there's so many more layers to this. And, you know, essentially what I want to be doing is creating a world where people feel free and safe to be themselves, their true, authentic selves, and not have to fear discrimination, not having to fear like people are not going to like them, they're not going to belong if they are themselves. And people don't have to conform. We see the value, we see the beauty, and we cherish the differences that we have with each other. And that is what I want to create. And that's what I want to create for my babies. And that's what I want to create for everyone. Being yourself and feeling free to do that in whatever expression you feel you need to. So it's so much more than that. So if people want to work with me, I mean, I'm sure you're going to put in my Facebook link and my Instagram link and all that. Just come and check out my content. I've got a lot of free stuff, and you can just get a feel of how I do things. I'm all about social change, but I'm not about it in the way of coming from anger or guilt or shame or injustice or anything like that. The way I do mine is, and I have been involved in lots of protesting and lots of social change stuff, and I found that to be quite ineffective, and it didn't align with me and who I am and how I want to show up in the world. Excuse me. I do it from the other end of the scale. I do it from the other end of love and of justice and of peace and of community and of freedom, and going, this is where I want it to be. This is what I want to create. And if you want to create this too, come along this journey, because we're going to change the world from that vibration, from those emotions. And so it feels good and it feels light and it feels nice to be part of that.
I love it. Yeah, I love it so much. And I really adore, like, I've been watching your stuff for quite a while now, and I adore how your process really focuses on getting our core and our foundations solid, because once we start to take those steps that are quite vulnerable, having the core and the foundations and the community to be solid within you makes it so much easier to take those vulnerable steps and accept that some of those are not going to work very well. Like, whether, you know, it doesn't achieve what you were hoping it would achieve, or whether, you know, you say something that actually causes more harm than you expected or upsets the people that you weren't intending to involve in a conversation. Knowing that your core is solid, it just gives you that much more confidence and resilience to keep going. I think the thing is, we've got so much inclusion work to do. A big part of it needs to be, how do we keep going? And so I adore all your work. I highly recommend everybody check it out. I will put all the links in the comments for everybody to come and check it out. Thank you so much for coming along, Louise. It was fantastic to get to know you some more, and I hope that everybody's really enjoyed it.
Yay. I do want to share one more thing. Now, this is coming to me. It's been like niggling that I need to address this for some reason. So I very intuitively. So whatever comes to me, I need to talk about. When we're talking about inclusion, we're not talking about stripping back the differences that we have. So particularly if we're talking about with our children, about being inclusive of everyone else. So things like saying, you know, well, we're all the same underneath is not the best way to go about being inclusive, because what that story or what that message is to your children is, then if we strip back our differences, then we're okay because we're the same. And inclusion is not about wanting to be the same. Inclusion is about going, see that person? They look different to us. So they identify different to us. And you know what? That's beautiful and that's okay. And they still belong. So not stripping back those differences, because then you are denying those people of their own identities and making it only okay if they are the same. And that is not what inclusion is about. Inclusion is about everyone is included with all of their beautiful richness of differences.
Oh, I just love that so much. It's just like, it fills my heart to think not just the children we're giving that message but it's also without everybody is like, be more you. Like, you're supposed to be different. We're all different. Be more of what that is, whatever that is, be more of that.
Exactly.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much again, Louise. And I'm sure we will have you back again. And as I said multiple times, I'll put the links for everybody into the comments box to come and check you out. Thanks again.
Beautiful. Mwah. Bye, everyone.